Welcome, class. This week we're going to talk about TRICARE and CHAMPVA. We're going to skip the learning outcomes and the key terms, but make sure that you go through those as usual. So first we'll talk about TRICARE, and this week TRICARE and CHAMPVA are both federally funded programs just like Medicare and Medicaid, but these are specific to military personnel. TRICARE itself we're going to talk about first, and it's a program designed to cover military personnel who are active duty and those who are retired and some former spouses and survivors of deceased military members. It replaced a former program called CHAMPVA, which stood for Civilian Health and Medical Program of the Uniformed Services. So that's very similar to CHAMPVA, which is still in place. CHAMPVA is no longer in place. That was replaced by TRICARE. So in order to be eligible for TRICARE, you have to be a member of any of our branches of the military, including the National Guards and the Coast Guards and stuff like that. The Reserve and National Guard personnel only become eligible after they've been active duty for more than 30 consecutive days or after they've retired from reserve status at the age of 60. Those who are eligible for this program, those active duty or uniformed service members who are not currently active duty but they're serving in the military, they're called sponsors, and that's because once they're eligible for this coverage, their family is also eligible for this coverage. Both in TRICARE and CHAMPVA, that primary member that's holding the insurance is called the sponsor. In order to check eligibility, it would be checked in something called DEERS, Defense Enrollment Eligibility Reporting System. So it's a database of TRICARE and CHAMPVA beneficiaries. However, the provider cannot check directly through the system if somebody is eligible, so that person would have to come with their eligibility status, print it off, or giving some other proof that they're eligible for their treatment. So at every visit, the patient should come in with their eligibility status and also with their military ID card that you would then copy both the front and the back every single time they visit, just to make sure that they're still active in the military and they're still working for it, essentially. So just like with Medicare and Medicaid, providers can decide whether they're going to participate or not. And the rules are pretty similar for participating and non-participating providers as for Medicare and Medicaid. So if they participate, that means that they are going to fully accept any fee that TRICARE deems is appropriate for the service that is being given. So anything that TRICARE says that they are going to pay for a specific service, the provider would then write off the additional amount that they would normally have on their fee schedule. So say an office visit's normally $115 in a doctor's office, but TRICARE says that they will only cover $70. Then the doctor would take that $70 from TRICARE and they would write off the rest. So TRICARE actually follows the Medicare fee schedule, so anything that Medicare would deem appropriate for payments for certain services, TRICARE follows that as well. Providers have to file claims on behalf of the patients, which is pretty standard anyway. You don't often see patients handing out claims to their insurance companies. The providers normally do that for them. They can also appeal decisions if TRICARE decides to deny coverage for a certain service. So you can make an appeal if you thought it was medically necessary. Non-participating providers are those who are not accepting TRICARE's fees. They can still see patients who are under TRICARE, but that patient will be responsible for 100% of the fees from this provider. Non-participating providers cannot charge more than 115% of the allowable charge. So although they do not participate with TRICARE, they still kind of have to shoot in the ballpark of the TRICARE's fee schedule, just like with Medicare and Medicaid. They're not allowed to appeal any decisions, which makes sense because they're not really submitting claims and expecting coverage from TRICARE anyway, being that they don't participate with TRICARE. The patient should be paying any allowable charges at the time of visit, and then TRICARE will reimburse them in the mail. There's what's called a cost share, which is basically a co-insurance for TRICARE and CHAMPVA, where a patient is expected to pay a percentage of the visit. So whatever percentage that they are not responsible for, that's the percentage that TRICARE is responsible for, and that's the part that they will be reimbursed in the mail. Usually the cost share for TRICARE and CHAMPVA is around 20-25%. TRICARE Prime is the basic managed care health plan. So just like Medicare, Medicaid, they have specific managed care, but also fee-for-service plans. This is the plan that all active duty members are enrolled in automatically. They don't have any other choices. After enrollment in TRICARE Prime, each sponsor will then be assigned a primary care manager, which will be their primary care doctor, that they have to go to in order to be referred to any specialists. So they will coordinate and manage that care. Anything that's included in the Affordable Care Act, like preventative services and checkups and all of your basic medical needs, TRICARE Prime will cover. So no deductible and no payment is required for any active duty family members. But for TRICARE Prime, there is a fee that you have to pay every year in order to be enrolled if you are not active duty. It usually ends up being about near $600 for a family. And then you have the cost share on top of that for each treatment. But there's no deductible. So these services for being treated by doctors, they will occur within prime service areas. So they are areas that are designated for active duty members. So there are specific bases, specific ports, whatever branch that they're in, that have these areas where you can go and seek care. And usually it's at a military treatment facility. So usually these are either civilian or military personnel doctors that will take care of usually strictly military personnel and their families. There's what's called a catastrophic cap, which is a maximum annual amount of the cost share that a TRICARE beneficiary has to pay. They call it, say, for deductible, but for TRICARE Prime, there's not really a deductible that's in place. It's more for the cost share benefits. So, say they have to pay that 20-25% every time they're seen. If they're active duty military, their cap for the year is $1,000. So once they pay that $1,000, they don't have to pay a cost share anymore. For anybody who's not active duty, it's between $3,000 and $3,500. So that's their cap. Once they meet that, they don't have to pay any cost share for the rest of the year. TRICARE will pay the allowed amount, and then the doctor will write off any other expenses. So TRICARE Select is that fee-for-service version of the health plan. So it replaced a bunch of programs, the Champus program, the TRICARE Standard, and TRICARE Extra. A lot of old programs that are no longer in place. For this, enrollees have to pay deductibles and also cost share percentages. It's not available to active duty service members. Like we said, TRICARE Prime is their only option. TRICARE Select is a more expensive, but you have more choices with it and who you can see. and which areas you can go to get these treatments. TRICARE for Life is a program specifically for beneficiaries who are both Medicare and TRICARE eligible. So remember, to be Medicare eligible, they must be disabled or 65 or older. So if you are enrolled in Medicare Parts A and B and you are in the military or a retiree from the military and you qualify for TRICARE as well, then you will be enrolled in TRICARE for Life. So in this case, when you have both Medicare and TRICARE, TRICARE will act as the secondary insurance. So claims will be sent to Medicare first, and then once Medicare is paid what they're going to pay, they will automatically cross that claim over to TRICARE for Life. So that was all TRICARE. We're going to shift gears over to CHAMPVA. CHAMPVA stands for Civilian Health and Medical Program of the Department of Veterans Affairs. So this is going to share the healthcare costs for families of veterans with 100% service-connected disabilities, and also the surviving spouses and children of veterans who die from service-connected disabilities. So this is different from TRICARE in the sense that TRICARE is for people who are still in the military and they're still on a base and they're going to seek care through specific TRICARE designated facilities, whereas CHAMPVA is going to be through the VAs. You can remember that because it says VA at the end, through these veterans associations. Once patients who are eligible for CHAMPVA come in for an appointment through the VA, the medical staff have to check their authorization card, which is also called an A card, and then photocopy both sides. VA coverage covers most necessary medical services. It's nice in the sense that everything is in one place as far as documentation is concerned. All of the providers input their documentation into one system, so all of the doctors can kind of see what's going on with their patient, who they've been seeing, if they've been following up with their care like they're supposed to be doing. However, it's also a federally run program and a federally run building, and a lot of veterans complain that it's kind of hard to jump. They have a lot of hoops to jump through in order to get the care that they need, because there's a lot of automated services that they have to talk to in order to get, real people on the phone to schedule these appointments. Just like TRICARE, CHAMPVA is normally the secondary payer, so a lot of these people also qualify for things like Medicare, so they would be under Medicare primarily and then secondarily CHAMPVA. Just like TRICARE for Life, there's also CHAMPVA for Life. If you're enrolled in Medicare Parts A and B and you qualify for CHAMPVA, then Medicare pays first and CHAMPVA pays second. So just like all of our other health plans, TRICARE is subject to HIPAA violations. So making sure that we avoid things like fraud and abuse. The Program Integrity Office is going to oversee any fraud and abuse that could occur. The Office of Inspector General is going to identify and prosecute any cases. There's quality inspectors who perform quality and utilization reviews, just like Medicare. And we've talked about fraud and abuse so much. We've pretty much talked about it for every chapter so far. So you know what it is. Basically taking advantage of the system. So for TRICARE, any participating providers are going to file claims on behalf of the patients unless the patients are seeing a non-participating provider, in which case those individuals will send their own TRICARE claims since the doctor is non-participating. For CHAMPVA claims, those are filled out by the providers and also submitted on behalf of the patient to the centralized CHAMPVA claims processing center. They have to be filed within 1 year of the date of service or discharge. CHAMPVA, just like TRICARE, they pay the equivalent to Medicare rates. So the medical providers that see both TRICARE and CHAMPVA Patients should know what to expect in regards to what the allowable amount will be and what they will be getting back from these insurance companies. CHAMPVA also has a maximum allowable charge. So they have a maximum amount that they will pay for a service or procedure, just like Medicare and TRICARE. So let me know if you have any questions on this chapter. It's pretty similar to our Medicare and Medicaid. It's just very specific to military personnel and their families.